I think acting is it's a bit like.
Welcome to the show, Jaden Randall.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. So, you've said on your website that you have this distinct love for voice acting. What is it about voice acting that A makes you love it and B makes you keep coming back to it?
So I've always loved kind of acting as a child. I spent a lot of time as a kid in theatre school growing up, but I also have this horrific stage fright. So I don't like performing in front of other people. So I kind of put my acting on a back burner. It's like, oh, I don't like performing in front of a crowd. But voice acting, because you can do it in a an isolated booth where it's quite an intimate kind of recording setting, I I'm able to do what I enjoy acting without the fear of having to do it in front of a load of people.
Would you say, with the voice acting, it kind of eliminates that stage fright because then you can just literally grab a mic, set it up in your booth, and go. And now we are playing as a insert, say a bat here or something.
Yeah, that there's a bit of a comfort net in it because it is so isolated by yourself that you don't have as much fear. I mean, if you're working for a production company, it might you might have to go into a studio and it'll just be you and a sound technician, maybe a director. It's a lot different than being on a stage and standing in front of 50 to 100 people, or even a film set where you're standing with like 50 to 100 people, the whole crew and extras and all that such.
Have you ever done that where you've worked on a film crew? Because I know you've. We'll get into this a bit later, but I know you've done some filmmaking.
Yeah, so I've been part of some film crews behind the cameras, like kind of like a DIT, like helping with camera offloading stuff. I've worked as an extra every now and again. Uh, I think I was in his Dark Materials as an extra at one point, but that was a lot of people as well. I've come to find that I generally do prefer smaller crowds of people. It gets a bit too overwhelming when there's like 100 people around you.
Is that why you chose to do voice acting? Because you've put on your website that, or you said on your website that you grew up in the countryside, you're surrounded by horses, but you developed a
Mm.
passion for telling stories from films, gaming, and other TV shows as well. Would you say that not only influenced you, but it also showed you like a way of telling stories without being in front of a crowd? If you had to look back in hindsight,
I think acting is it's a bit like that childhood wonder of play. Like a lot of actors, when you speak to them as children, they've always had that kind of imaginative sense where it's like, oh, we like to tell stories, we like to create imaginary worlds. And for me, that was always present as a child. I mean, to be honest, I wasn't a big fan of farm handling life and like helping my mother with her horses and stuff. So you you do a lot of things to kind of retreat into create like stories or collaborate with other people to tell stories. And acting is just an extension of that. It's all about the fun of make believe. It kind of is more like playing than it is say like a serious 9 to 5 office job.
it sounds a bit like a life of a comedian before like the early stages of a comedian's life where they would tell jokes to their parents to cheer them up. In your case and other actors' cases, sounds not you're telling stories to parents to cheer them up, but you're reliving like a childhood aspect of oh, I really like to tell stories of Dungeons and Dragons, for example, or you really
Mm.
liked the horror genre, so you kind of wanted to express that in your professional work. Would you kind of agree with that sentiment, or would you say they're a bit too different for that to make sense?
I think there's just an intrinsic joy when it comes to telling stories. If you think about it from human history, our throughout all of our lives, we always tell stories. We are storytellers as people. I mean, you can go back to things like the Bible or even later on, say Shakespearean plays. We're always finding new ways to entertain and kind of engross people, and you can find a lot of other things inside of the medium. I quite like experimenting with different thought sets that aren't my own. Like everyone says like I enjoy playing a villain, but sometimes playing a villain is very interesting because you get to like delve into like what is the psychology behind this mindset that you can never do in real life because that'd make you an absolutely terrible person. But there's a bit of a morbid fascination with like how people think, and what the experience is when you get yourself into that kind of mindset.
I think with the villains as well, I've noticed it with audiences as well, and there's this trend at the moment where we want to know the villain's backstory because we kind of want to see what's made them break. I've referenced him a bit too much on the show, but I had another voice actor by the name of Brian S. Farr. I don't know whether you know him, but he said to me that he gravitates more towards villains himself. And I think with villains, it's more. I think people just want to see what it takes to make someone break, because we want to know what drove him to the backstory. The only example I can think of is Persona 4's Goro. I forget how you say his surname. Taro Dachi. It's something along those lines. It's a Japanese name, but basically in the animation they show his backstory, and then I read all the comments on the where this person put on YouTube, and they basically said, "Well, whilst I don't sympathise with the guy, I get it." So I think that people want to see what makes someone break.
I can't remember who it was. It might have been Brandon Lee Mulligan or someone that I was watching an interview with, and they kind of talked about the allure of a villain to a common person is common people. We have regret and we have guilt, and in our minds, we like to think, oh, what if I just didn't feel bad about anything I did? If I could just do something and be in the moment, and that's what a villain is, and that's why people are quite attached to them, because it's like you kind of look at them and go, wow, you just have no regrets, no anxiety. You go for it. And that's probably the allure to quite a lot of people, why people like villains.
There's also an interesting stat with crime documentaries and women, where apparently the reason that women like to watch crime documentaries is because they can use it as not as like a test, like a simulation, but more like a out of count or out of experience with third person viewing of what not to do to get yourself into that situation. And I reckon the villains kind of like that. Some people use that as, okay, what did this villain do and what can I not do to end up like this villain? So say Thanos, just to give an example. Okay, I know he's different in the films, but in the comics he tries to impress Death, or Lady Death. So someone might say, oh, that's how he... Be careful falling in love, you might end up a genocidal maniac, because some would put that connection together, but some would say, okay, just be wary of guys who get a bit too intimate. So I think there's also there's kind of multiple sides to it, where you've got the sides like analysing, and then you got the others just more intrigued, and someone just there like, yep, that's why he did it.
I think there is also a swing now in current media that people are starting to go back to villains that are just villains for the sake of it. Because I think the recent movie I saw was like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, where they had like multiple villains, but Jack Horner, I think I love that the most. Where he's like, "That's horrible! You're horrible! You're an irredeemable monster!" And he's like, "Yeah, what took you so long, idiot?" Flicks him off his shoulder. And I think people have, I feel a bit of a sense of relief, because they're like, okay, for the last 10 years or so, like villains and such have always had to have like really complex nuanced depth. Maybe we just want someone who's bad for the sake of being bad.
Why did you blow up that minibus? I was bored. With your voice acting roles, you've done quite a few different roles, but they've not all been media based. Some of them been social media, medical, e-learning, etc., etc. But some of them been for big organisations. Because I know you've done one for PayPal. Another one was NHS. Submarine delivery company. I didn't get a chance to look into them that much. I believe a government.
They're part of under the umbrella of the Ministry of Defence. Once building all of our submarines.
What's it like to do voice work for big established organisations, and how does that contrast from, say, a media role? So I'll get into this later, but I know you were the main character for Sumerian 6, which is a video game, but that's an entertainment piece. The work with, say, the submarine deliveries or delivery agency, that's more for government organisations. So how do they clash? How do they differ?
So I can start by how they're similar. So in every case, you are still playing a character, even if you're doing a medical narration, or if you're doing like an eccentric character in an animated or video game. You're still playing someone, like a role. It's usually if you're doing something corporate, you're envisioning yourself as a caretaker or some kind of like parental figure if you're helping to educate someone, or more like a childlike best friend figure if you're trying to be like an individual learning with someone. So those um those bleed together. But I'd say a lot of differences in the corporate world is they're not too sure on what the final product's going to look like. If you work for anyone who does like an animation or anyone who does a video game, they have a very strong artistic vision of kind of like this is what the end product is going to look like. But if you go to an organization, it's more we have a need that needs to be met. It's like, oh, we need to do some marketing to promote like a new topic, a new policy change, or we need to do some internal education to teach people. And they don't put so much of a thought into how it's delivered. They just have here's our script. Someone can read it, and then as an actor, you kind of got to know roughly what they want their end goal, and if even if they don't, whilst something like a animation series, your handheld a little bit more because there's a more finite vision I've found. But they can sometimes speed over. Sometimes you get one or two corporations that are really they know what their brand is, their unique selling point. They're like, this is the voice that we just use for all of our products. This is what people associate us with. Can you match that closely or match that feeling, that cadence?
Quite interesting because I got told I had him on Peter McPherson, who's a actor. He did Hollyoaks for those who do know, and he says because he's done some corporate adverts, and he said to me that they tend to be they know what they want and they want it very strict, and it's quite interesting that you've come along and you've said no, it's actually the opposite. They don't know what they want. So it's actually quite nice to hear the contrast.
The fields are very different because it is an evolving field. Like things like AI and stuff have completely changed like the low end spectrum of people who used to take quick jobs that didn't pay so well, but you could rack up quite a lot of them and build out a nice return on that. They're getting sorted up by AI now. And it can vary. I think if a corporation has like a really good on the nose marketing team, they will be able to dictate what they want in the end. But sometimes they don't. It's but most of the times I've done corporate stuff, I think I've just been in the position where they haven't really known what they want, and I go in, I give my first take, and they're like, "Yeah, that's good," and it's like, "Okay, as long as you're happy, I'm happy."
No, I see your point of view. It's some companies are going to be at different stages, so they will know what to do. So let's pick a
Mm.
different one. Nike, for example, they let's be
They
yeah, they would know what they want, but let's say a startup at a different shoemaker who's just a startup, they might not know what they want.
Mm.
The whole thing could be we sell shoes, and you come along and go, what? How do you want me to present this? Do you want me to be upbeat? Do you want me to be
Mm.
depressing, but to the point where I can then flip it to be inspirational, or do you want it to have like more of a melody? And they would just turn around like, make it up, please.
Yeah, another part that's kind of hard. It's like as long as you know who the target audience is, like, oh, am I selling this to a group of people my age? Am I trying to sell this to elderly carers, or am I trying to sell to kids? Different audiences, different ways you would approach that.
I want to. You mentioned about AI, and I want to pick up that topic back up, where you mentioned it's taking a lot of low-level, quick money jobs, and I've been told this before as well. And what's your take on AI in the voice acting industry as a whole? Because I wonder, are they going to flat out ban it? Because I know in the state of California, I've mentioned this before on the show, but they've banned AI actors in general, not just voice actors, but in I think it's across the board. Keep in mind, I only read the title. But do you think that will end up happening, or do you think it would be there'll be a limit on what you can do with AI and acting. So they might say, no, you can't use AI for big productions, but small productions like you just hire someone on Fiverr for 5 lines and you use that for, I don't know, your cafeteria or something. They'll still allow that. Or can you see it just completely sidelining? Because It's interesting how it could go because if they put restrictions on it, corporations are going to get creative to get around it. If you don't put restrictions on it, then you run into the issue of AI just sounding completely taking everything over, and everyone's going to start complaining, why does this sound so robotic? So, what's your take of it as someone in the industry?
AI is it's a tool, it's a piece of technology. A couple almost 100 years ago, the candle was replaced with the light bulb, and that shook up a lot of the world. It's definitely disruptive in the field, but I don't think it's something that could probably be legislated at this point. It's once that box has been opened, it's been opened, and AI is here to stay. I think the one thing that people can legislate for is ethical use of AI, because there is definitely a very serious issue that we are facing with it, where voices are being cloned, personalities are being cloned, and the individual party may not have consent to their voice being cloned. And then all of a sudden, you've got a model now that you can make anyone say anything you want, anything unethical, spread misinformation. And the talent, the actor, or just the person who's had that stolen, they don't have a right to do anything about that. I mean, you can try and go to court and be like, look, I want you to not use this. And then they might turn around and say, oh, no, we just use someone who sounds like you. It's just a coincidence. Or or they're in a foreign national country and they just ignore any legal route whatsoever. It's a very interesting time to be in. I think the way we approach it as the people who could suffer most from it being used in the wrong way is we need to educate people about the software, and we need to kind of help people understand the ethical implementations of it, because AI can be beneficial. It can streamline quite a lot of processes. It can help people who usually struggle reading legal documents, and AI can digest your legal document, give you like basic bullet point notes of this, what that means, is what this means. That stuff's exceptionally helpful. And there's things like planning and all stuff. There's some benefits to it. It's just that it needs to be used in an ethical manner. But in order for it to be done so, everyday people need to understand the ethics behind it.
I would also say when it comes to ethics and legislation, it's what you're saying about the foreign policy stuff. I know in China they have it where, technically speaking, their copyright laws are different than what is in the UK and the US. So what you'll find over there is, yeah, they've got Starbucks, but it's like Starbucks. So they've got the same logo, it's got the same branding, but it's not Starbucks as such. You could have that in, say, another country, but I also think I think it's a slippery slope which we've already slid down a bit too much because we have this issue now where there have already been stories. I'm not going to. I've already used this story of a teacher who basically someone had AI say a bunch of racist stuff against them. Long story short, they found out it wasn't them, it was AI, and the teacher was fine. But we've already started seeing that. I don't. Unless we get the ice picks now, I don't see any way of stopping it. I forget which organisation was on strike about. I think it was last year about AI. It was like,
It's probably SAG. If it's from an
that's
actor
it.
standpoint, that'd be SAG-AFTRA. I think they're still on strike now. At least the video game section still is,
Are
if
they?
I recall. I think they still are,
Wow.
because they've been on strike for quite a while. Because it's so new, and governments never are great at regulating anything that comes out that's new. So people are quite panicked by it. I I find that you find yourself on like three spectrums when it comes to AI. You're either outright like, we need to get rid of it, like wipe off face of the earth, which I don't think can be done. There are people that be like, we need to shame anyone that uses AI. We need to like guilt anyone into not using it. I don't think that helps, because all you do is you develop a backlash movement of people that are gonna be like, well, I'm just gonna use it out of spite now. And you got people that want to bury their head in the sand, which I can understand that. It's growing fast. It's really complicated to understand, and there is a big temptation to like cover your ears and go, oh no, I don't want to pay attention to it. Just let me do my own thing. Then you got people that might try to adopt it. I'm not quite into the adoption phase. I know a few voice actors that have already cloned their own voice, because I mean, arguably from their sense, I can see why. They're like, look, someone's gonna steal it anyway at some point. I might as well make my own model. At least then I can get a kickback from anyone I sell it to. I think there are pros and cons to both of those things.
I would also argue that, yeah, I agree there's definitely different sides to the AI conversation when it comes to voice acting. I would also think, I think I would describe it as Pandora's box, like you said. Once it's being opened, it can't be shut. But I think it's being opened. It's quite. I remember when it first really came into the public sphere. It was, oh, by the way, AI is a thing. Then all the schools ran like mad to ban it because there was this one student in Russia who, I think it was all this, but there was this one student in Russia who wrote his entire dissertation using AI and he passed. And the school system's like, don't, you're not allowed to use AI, otherwise you get banned. That's not allowed. But I also think I'm not sure. I don't think. I agree with you, can't be stopped. I mean, you've got companies like Intel, AMD, and Nvidia who are now putting AI like cores into their tech to make it work. So I know Intel's new CPUs have got AI specific chips. I know the new 5000 series graphics cards have AI chips. I'm not sure about AMD, but I would not be surprised if they came out and say, by the way, guys, we've got some cores which are, or like some threads which are tailored exclusively to AI. I really wouldn't surprise me. I'd be more surprised if they didn't, to be honest. I think we're definitely heading in the direction of AI. It's just, where do we go from there?
It's evolving technology. It can't be stopped, I don't think. But it's just a case of can people be ethical with it? And back to your point about like universities writing their dissertations in AI, I think that if people want to write essays and write dissertations in AI, they go ahead, because a dissertation is just a word verbiage that is put on paper. What's important is, can you put any of those theories into practice? I think I had a friend who's a software engineer, and he says, oh yeah, people were to submit me like, let's say, AI drivel. That doesn't matter, but can you code? Can you like look at your code and fix a problem when it goes wrong? Or are you able to actually build something? That's what matters. I mean, I know some people make an argument that AI is really bad for critical thinking right now, because people take everything the engine says verbatim without realizing that it's basically designed to give you an answer you want, not necessarily the right answer.
I don't know if they still have it, but I remember when ChatGPT had that thing saying, by the way, AI may get the answer wrong. Double check. I remember, I don't know if they still got that. I want to go back to your role as Sid from Sumerian 6, because Sid's the main character, or Sid Sterling's the main character in that game.
One of the main playable characters, yeah.
Yeah. Isn't he the main character, if I'm correct?
I think it jumps between him and his sister quite a fair bit, but he is, I think, a key like driving force for most of the game.
What was it like to play a character, to use your words, was the key driving force in the game? So what was it like to take up a pivotal role in a just any media in general, forget a video game?
Well, it's like going back to childhood, though. It's like I got to play a big muscle bound kind of like Nazi killer, which that's quite a breath of relief when like, you do quite a fair bit of corporate things here and there. There's so much joy in just pretending in that world. And I got to work with the studio and the directors on many sessions recording those lines, which that's always fun, because sometimes you have to self-direct, and it's nice just to go backwards and forwards. Like I got to change a couple of lines or something, because I think, what was one line in the trailer where it's something like he's like, oh, he's going to take over the world, what a dick. I think the original word was asshole, and I'm like, we don't really say asshole that much in England. Can I just call him a dick?
So playing Sims was like reliving your childhood in a weird way. It's like, hey, I get to go and murder something.
Well, if you look at kids playing, a lot of their games are actually quite violent. They're like, oh yeah, we've got to kill all the monsters, kill them all. I think from a Dungeons and Dragons standpoint, I remember saying, what's it, like a father DM for a bunch of his local, like his kids and his friends. He's like, he was horrified, like coming from a group of adults to kids. He's like, my God, all these children have the morality of Judge Dredd.
That reminds me, when I was a kid in primary school, we played Pokemon, but we be the Pokemon when we do the moves on each other. Flip-flop, use Peck Attack, and I literally we would do that. It was actually quite fun.
Yeah, card game. Most of our stuff at school got banned. I think Beyblades were banned pretty quick.
Really?
I think people modded them and put like metal edges on them. And they became a bit too dangerous for kids to be launching at each other. And I think Yu-Gi-Oh was eventually banned because we played hardcore rules. You lose, the opponent gets to keep one of your cards. Absolutely devastating.
Yeah, and they always took the best one.
Why wouldn't you?
No, we didn't have that problem at my school, but we did have it. We had the opposite problem where they lasted a bit too long. What would you mentioned about Dungeons and Dragons, and I know you've been somewhat involved with that, but I couldn't unfortunately find so much about it. But what has your involvement with D&D been?
Well, I started it during the pandemic, as most people probably took it up to stop themselves going insane. And it is probably the best tool I've ever had to help build my acting as well. I'm the dungeon master, so I play all the non-player characters, all the creatures they fight, all the enemies. So I get to try out voices and such with like my friends, and they're pretty good. They'll call me out if something sounds terrible. So it's almost like a practice workshop that I get to try and develop new skills and like do weird creature noises and such. And I think there's some real fun in collaborative storytelling. So you're sat around a table with four plus, in my case, 6 players. My table keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. And it's everyone adding their own unique perspective and like throwing wrenches into stories and making things I'd never expect. I think my favorite we ever did, you couldn't script it. It was so hilarious. Like I threw a random genie. As like all the players going by, they found like a magic artifact. He's like, oh, it's covered in a bit of rust. They give it a wipe, but geez, like you've set me free. You get one wish. And they was like, oh, what do I do? And I had the genius constantly probing, saying, oh, do you wish to know what you want? Do you? Because this genie just like wants to get the wish out of them. And I kept probing and probing. Eventually, the player goes, gee, I wish to know nothing at all. And it's like, very well. And you couldn't write that. It was just a genuine mistake, but it was so funny.
Because I watch, this is admittedly a guilty pleasure of mine, I watch Second Wind's Adventures and I, which is Dungeons, their own D&D show. And some of the shenanigans the players come up with, and you see their dungeon master go, no! You I'm trying to do my best Jack Packard impression. It's like, no! You ruined my...
I'm different. Like my common one is like, if they're about to do something, I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure you're going to do that? And then they either double down and go, yes.
That's a trigger word. It's, you're going to do it. Yes. And we just do it. But how would you say that Dungeons and Dragons, because you said about the influence, like your monster side of things, I did listen to a demo of that, but how else would you say it's influenced your voice acting?
It helps because voice acting is a very emotional driven kind of art and craft. So when you create a character, you've got to know what their emotional reasoning is behind things. So every NPC I put into D&D, I'm like, okay, how are they feeling in this moment? Because every character is different and their walks of life. So it's like hopping into multiple different personalities. And anything I've built long enough in D&D, I can then extract later on down the line. So if someone's like, oh, would you like to play this evil lich character? It's like, I have done an evil lich in D&D. I can pull from that. Or it's like a heroic paladin. I can pull from that. It's just created a big toolbox of characters that I can pull from at a later notice. So I think it's absolutely beneficial. And improv skills. Everyone's really big on improv right now. If like you've got a client who's not too sure what they want. Like they're not too sure on the lines themselves. If you have a really good ability to just on the fly make something natural come out, it just gives you so much of an edge in the field.
You mentioned about the getting into the emotional side of the NPCs you players and how that feeds into your professional career. Would you say you also have to get into the psychological side as well? Because you've got the two. Because people aren't just raw emotion; they're not just raw psychological. They're a mixture of both. Would it be fair to say that you have to consider the psyche side of them, or do you kind of just disregard that?
When I create a character, there's an NPC, I usually start with a simple point like this is where they reside, this is their role, and this is their rough personality. Are they an aggressive personality type? And because the issue with overfleshing every character, you can't guarantee your players are going to talk to every character. So I start with the bare bone basics, and if the players want to interact more with that character, I then, after each game, go home and spend a little time thinking, okay, so they're in this town. Why are they in this town? They have this personality. Why do they have this personality? And then you can start fleshing out a further character. But I like to keep it as bullet point notes and then flesh out if required, because there's nothing worse than like spending a day or two writing 3 pages document on a really interesting character, which they never see, and then because they decide to burn the town down instead.
I can understand what you're basically saying is I don't want to do a bunch of wasted effort. It's like, oh, this character's got a really interesting backstory, and once my players find out, they'll finally have an interest. Oh wait, they just flat out killed it by accident with a crossbow or something.
Yeah. Or 9 times out of 10, they just misinterpreted the situation and gone, that guy must be a villain. He must die. It's like, no, he was a secret rebel. He was leading the order against them. You throw the rebellion in disarray.
This person's a demon. No, they're cursed. They're a cursed child, so stop killing them.
The current party that we're playing is like they have this really bad habit. Any enemy's like, yeah, we're taking you prisoner. They're like, sorry, boss, it's not gonna fly with me. we don't get taken prisoners. Like, I'm like, oh my god, please, one of you just look into it. This person's pretending to take you prisoner. You don't need to kill him.
No. It's that Breaking Bad scene, isn't it? It was a Scarlet, I'm not in danger, I am the danger, but with them it's no, officer, you're not taking us to prison, we're the ones taking you to prison.
It's become an in-game joke right now. When anyone's threatening to take them into prison, a player goes, no, don't. You don't understand what's gonna happen. You put handcuffs on us, there's gonna be a chain of events that none of us can stop. Think about what you're doing.
It's a predictable role reversal. But at the same time, you keep putting them. If you keep putting them in that situation, it keeps happening. So it's kind of on you.
But usually it's on them. When you break the law, the guards are going to try and apprehend you.
How many bounty hunters do they have on them now?
Quite a few.
Yes. Oh, we're going to bring you to jail. No. Speaking of your other creative endeavors like Dungeons and Dragons, you've also made a few films yourself. One of them was Justice Gold, and I watched that yesterday. And what was your inspiration behind that? Because I kind of understood it. I'll let you explain it. I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, so Justice Gold, it's taken me a while back. That was my final film I made, because I studied filmmaking creative media at university. So back in the heyday, this is like 2015, 2016, I was quite into like the Marvel films. I really love superheroes. And I wanted to take the genre but kind of add a bit of a unique spin on it. And I was like, what if we did a bit like a Superbad scenario, where it's like a regular person wants to be a superhero. What if that regular person was like a senior citizenship kind of like retiree? And I thought there was quite a lot of emotional depth in there, because it also kind of tackled things like loneliness, which is quite common in like the elder generation. And the best way I could describe it is how I saw it. It's like a merging between like a bit like Superbad and Disney Pixar's Up is kind of how I saw them come together. But I'm quite a big fat stiffler of like taking a genre and playing on it a little bit, like putting a unique spin on it. It's like, oh, you've seen this like this horror type trope. What if we take it somewhere you're not expecting? I kind of do that a lot of that with most of my walks of life. I do it with D&D as well. It's like take a trope, but throw a bit of a wrench in it and see what comes out.
Because I watched it yesterday, and it was, I don't know how I describe it. I got it, but I don't see this nicely. I think it could have used a bit more depth, because I think you could have. Personally, I liked the idea, but I think it could have played a bit more on how dangerous it could have been.
Yeah, I was struggling a little bit with it because a lot of people were telling me that, oh, let's like make it like make some more grit to it, make it a bit more like dark. But it was like Daredevil was out around that time, and a lot of superheroes are doing dark and gritty. I was like, I don't want something dark and gritty. I want something a bit more light-hearted. Like I always said to people, like if this were to be released in a cinema, I want it to be PG because I just wanted it to be like kind of like a family movie, and you can't go too dark with a family movie.
They could do the Puss in Boots treatment.
Yeah, yeah. I think as I've gotten a bit older, if I were to retackle it again, I probably would be able to add a bit more depth in it because I've seen a lot more movies now, and like you said, Puss in Boots was able to have really mature themes in it, but not make it the forefront, so that it's something is like a thing that the adults can enjoy in the background while still being fundamentally a family-friendly orientated movie.
I would say I think one of Justice Gold's strengths is it does work on like the loneliness and isolation, because you see at the start of it, okay, well, spoiler alert for those who want to watch it, but it does start off with a guy just watching Superman originally, because you see him with the Superman. Yeah.
Yeah, to try and avoid copyright or anything, but it was I was basing it like he would watch some kind of similar show to what like the original cartoon Superman was, like really like 1940s 1950s kind of like superhero cartoons, and that's kind of what I based that off of. And then the idea was like he was quite alone, but then he was trying to relive like his childhood beliefs as being a superhero, and it was just his call to action.
Yeah, I found it somewhat comical. It's like you had the dramatic music, and then you had those bits where just kind of like
Yeah,
this walking stick. And you got this old guy. It was basically a knockoff Booster Gold costume without the blue,
Yeah.
going after someone for littering and smoking with a walking stick. It's kind of a bit comical because it's also, I found it quite awkward, but that was kind of the point. I got it was the point, but it was still the case.
Yeah, I think the humor is like, well, what he sees in his head versus what's actually happening in the street is what makes it quite funny.
Yeah, and I think well, technically they're criminals, but they're not. You wouldn't throw them in jail for it. You just tell them off for it. But well, maybe the graffiti artists, but the criminals, you would say. I think their reactions were genuine. Even if I was in that situation, I would think, who the hell is this guy? I'm just, fortunately for him, he doesn't get into like well, he does, but not a gang situation where it's like 3-on-1. The guy would have absolutely got decked for it. It's like, why is this old man doing? Well, just literally, it doesn't really pull out a knife. It could pull out like a knuckle dust, and the guy's done.
Oh yeah. So I think that's just like how I thought that's a good emotional climax to the movie, though. So the whole comedy is what's it? Trying to be a hero, but you're not actually really thwarting crimes. You're thwarting like mundane misdemeanors or something. But then the emotional crux is like you finally do get a chance to do something, and that's kind of like the general trope of a superhero movie, at least how I see it.
Yeah, because superhero films have this thing, especially when it's like that origin story. Like we've seen it quite a bit with Spider-Man, but Batman's maybe not the newer ones, but the older ones would certainly. They start off, they're doing all right, and they get beaten down, and the villain pops up and goes, "Aha! I've got such and such or so and so." And then they really swing into action, no pun intended, and then they become the full-blown superhero. I would say Justice Gold kind of does something similar, because he's in a comic book store. The guy runs out, he gets defeated, he reads a little note, and then he goes and saves his neighbor.
Yeah, it's the Dark Knight of the Soul premise. So I subscribe quite a lot to the basic the hero's journey is what you would call it in story writing, where you have your character, you establish who they are, what they're about, and then you throw an inciting incident in them, something that caused them to action, to partake in a change in their life, and then they hit a low slump, the dark night of the soul moment, where they hit an obstacle and they have to either change as a person or overcome that obstacle, and then you finally conclude the story with them probably back to where they were before, but they're now fundamentally changed as a person. They've either, what's it, overcome a hurdle, or they are defeated by it. If you want to take the hero's journey into a more sad route, I think there's quite a few films that, I think No Country for Old Men, that's very much a you go on your journey, but you came back far worse than when you started.
Oh, that's a tragedy. Hey, you've got now your way
Mm.
to go and, I don't know, find the magic cure for this disease. Oh no, you've not found the cure. The disease has made you not only sick, but now you're the source of the disease for some bizarre reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you come to realize that the cure will do more harm than good, and it's like, oh, was my original intentions wrong?
You reminded me, I used to play video games all the time, but I never played this one. There's this, I think it's Fable 2 or 3, where they have it where you go to the kingdom, you go and see the big bad king who has enslaved everyone. But then if you kill him, he's been doing it not to be horrible, but there's calamity coming. If they don't prepare for it, they're dead. So you have the choice. You either spare the king, they all live. You kill the king, you all die. So it sounds somewhat similar, doesn't it? It's like the thing you set out to do, you do it, but you've actually made the situation worse.
It's also a very hard thing to do from like a video game standpoint as well, because it can be done really well where it's like there's no good ending, but if the writing doesn't build up to that and it doesn't feel authentic, you're like, oh, none of my choices matter. I shouldn't have gone on this journey to begin with. Not a case of, oh, this journey had to happen, and it's just really complex writing that there's no perfect solution for everyone at the end.
It reminds me of the original Life is Strange. Back when I played that years ago, it's
That. No, I'm thinking of
Beyond.
Beyond Two Souls.
Oh, I did play that one as well. No, where they had it where you either you go back in time and let Chloe die, but then you prevent
Mhm.
the hurricane destroy Arcadia Bay, or you don't bother, but then Arcadia Bay gets destroyed. But the build up so nice as you go on this reconnection friend story with Chloe as Max, and then you rebuild your friendship, and then it's a case of, do you literally let your friend die to save everyone, or do you let your friend live? And keep in mind, you've uncovered something really sinister along the way. I'm not going to spoil that one. And then just basically undo all that and let that carry on. But you say, not,
Yeah,
but it's built up really well, is my point.
yeah. It's all about like it can't be you can't suddenly just drop that on someone. You've got to slowly weave in the hints that, okay, you're not gonna get what you're looking for, but you've got to make sure that it's weaved in, that's subtly there. I think like Telltale games did it quite a lot, like especially the earlier games, the Walking Dead interactive games. That was such a grim game. It's because you just look at it, you're like, oh my god, no matter what choice I pick, something bad is gonna happen.
Yeah, I never really got on with Telltale games. I played a Game of Thrones once, and I've lost the video because I tried finding it. This was years ago, but when I tried finding it, it was a top five one. The guy said there's no point in picking the other option because the other option. So you have two options: you either kill the guy or you don't. You can choose to kill the guy, but it doesn't matter. He's not going to die anyway. He's kind of yeah.
It's when branching narratives become a problem though. So like because Telltale got really ambitious, like here's four choices, but then you'd have to individually code different scenarios as that branch grows and grows and grows. So at some point, you have to find a way to loop the branches back in. Otherwise, you've just got an uncontrollable mess, and you'll have a game that takes 10 to 15 years to publish because you've got so many possibilities to go
Yeah,
down.
I remember when I played the Game of Thrones Telltale games. There's
Mm.
one we can literally shoot everyone, and that was the one I wanted. Keep in mind, the characters was really annoying, the plot was really boring, and I got it over and done with. And the game went. I think that's the only time I've ever failed a Telltale game section. So now you can't pick that one, and I thought, a that's annoying because why do I have the choice? And
Mhm.
B, what though that's kind of things it links with A. It's why
I think
bother? Why bother
Game
give me the option if you're just gonna say, nah, you can't have that one. You got to pick the one we want.
I think Game of Thrones, that was released when Telltale's were starting to struggle, I think, financially as well. So they had a bit of a pressure to churn out games a lot quicker than what they actually needed. I think they've been revived now, and it seems like they're taking a healthier approach where it's release when you're done. Don't overpromise things too early because it always it impacts the quality of the end product. Games need time.
Well, I don't think it needs time really.
What you mean? You think
Just
they
in
need time?
general, just in general, like any project, a film, a book, a game, a campaign, or like a business or whatever needs time. That's the thing. I remember this quote thing. She's an entrepreneur called Leila Hormozi says is that money loves speed, but wealth loves time. So it's kind of that same parable. How would you say with your filmmaking, with your primarily voice acting and your Dungeons and Dragons campaigning, how would you say how do you find time for all three? Because that must be a difficult set of plates to spin.
It is a lot of juggling. I probably have attention deficit disorder, so I hop to and from tasks multiple occasions, which maybe helps, maybe hinders. Hard to say, but I think D&D, it helps that I have a dedicated day to which I play. We'll be like, oh, Tuesday evenings every night. So then I know, okay, I can do prep work on Saturday or Sundays. Things like voice acting, you can allocate as well as you would. So things like some auditions I get sent, it's like, oh yeah, you can submit 2 weeks from now before it closes, and that's fine. You can calendar that in. But I've got an American agent, Stuart Talent, who then they send me auditions. I have a 24-hour turnaround window to submit an audition, and that's always a fun one because they're an American-based company. I get auditions from them probably about midnight, 1 a.m. sometimes in my time. Sometimes I get it like 10 p.m. So I wake up in the morning and go, I'm altering my schedule today. It's all good though. Keeps me on my feet. Helps keep the brain a bit more cognitive.
Oh, keep things fresh and energetic for you. Hey, you've got this potential role for the new Assassin's Creed game. Oh, damn it, I've only got 5 hours and I haven't even had breakfast.
Oh, that'd be cool. The next Assassin's Creed game. Although I think they've done London already, so I missed the boat on that one. I should have got into voice acting 10 years earlier.
I don't know what the new one is, and personally, I don't care. What can we expect to see from you next?
I mean, in terms of like, they'll probably be seeing some more video content from me. I've been slowly bringing stuff back into my YouTube channel. Don't expect anything consistent. I'm just experimenting with a lot of different things. I think I'm experimenting with drones right now to see what kind of stuff I can get from them. Voice acting wise, it's probably best just to follow me on Twitter, my social medias, to see when I announce things. Because the issue is you get NDA'd to oblivion a lot, like video games and stuff. So it's not until the game usually comes out or a trailer comes out you can announce, oh, by the way, I voiced this. So that's probably the best place to find me.
Oh, by the way, I'm involved in this project. Took them long enough to announce.
It's even more than a month. So some of my close friends, I think they've had to sit on a big casting announcement for 6 months, where it's like, oh, you've recorded this, but you can't tell anyone.
Yeah, I knew someone who apparently went to Ubisoft before they released. He didn't go into much detail, but he said to me, NDAs, you can't, unless they publicly say, you can't actually tell anyone. Yeah, nightmare. Jaden Randall, everyone. Well, you've already said where people can find you, but is there anywhere else people can find you? So you mentioned Twitter, you mentioned, well, it's now X, but you also mentioned YouTube. Is there anywhere else?
Yeah, I think I'm on Instagram as well. I don't post as frequently. I mean, let's be real. Social media is a bit of a mental health landscape, so I try to avoid being on most of it as much as possible. But YouTube's the most stuff you'll see me posting coming up. Apart from that, I as well as my website if anyone wants to get in touch.
If you enjoyed my conversation with Jaden Randall, then I know you will enjoy my conversations with these two voice actors, who I have Brian S. Farah, who is on my left, and Ariana Ratner, who is on my right. I'll see you in one of those 2 episodes.